It didn't start with a windfall. No inheritance, no lucky break, no viral moment. It started on a Tuesday, a quiet Tuesday, when you looked at your bank account and saw $412. Not 412,000, 412. And you realized that you had been making money for years. Decent money, but you had nothing to show for it. This is the story of the 90 days that changed that. Your 90 days. Week 1, you did something most people never do. You looked. Not a glance. Not the kind of look where you feel the number, flinch, and close the tab. A real, sustained look at exactly where your money had been going. You pulled 3 months of bank and credit card statements and categorized every single transaction. What you found was uncomfortable. Your take-home pay was about $3,800 a month. You knew that. What you didn't know, what you had never actually sat down to calculate, was where all of it was going. Fixed expenses, rent, utilities, car payment, insurance, phone. That was $2,800. Predictable, mostly unavoidable. Debt payments, a minimum of $185 a month on $6,200 of credit card debt at nearly 23% interest. That number, 23%, you wrote it down and stared at it. And then the discretionary category, the one that told the real story. Food and dining, $340. Rideshare, $90. Subscriptions, $85 across 7 services, 4 of which you hadn't opened in over 2 months. Clothing and random purchases, $160 of things you couldn't fully account for. Entertainment and going out, $60. Total monthly spend, $3,720. You were making $3,800. You were saving $80 a month. Not by design, just by accident, whatever happened to be left. That was the moment the clarity hit. You weren't broke, you were leaking. Week 2, you sorted those expenses from largest to smallest and asked one question about each of them. Can I reduce this by 10 to 30% over the next 90 days? Not eliminate, reduce. The car insurance you had been paying for 3 years without comparing. One call, 40 minutes, a new quote. You saved $54 a month. The subscriptions, you canceled 4 of the 7. The gym app you hadn't opened since March. The news subscription you forgot you signed up for. 2 streaming services that had been quietly charging you since last year. That was $46 a month back in your pocket. The dining and rideshare, you didn't cut it to 0. You set a cap. $280 for food, $60 for rideshare. The discipline wasn't deprivation. It was just a decision. By the end of week 2, you had recovered nearly $190 a month. Annualized, that's over $2,200. You hadn't gotten a raise. You hadn't started a business. You had just stopped funding a lifestyle you weren't even fully enjoying. That money was always yours. It had just been leaving without permission. Week 3 was the week the game changed. Not because something dramatic happened, because something automatic happened. You opened a high-yield savings account, one earning around 4.5%, not the 0.01% your checking account had been silently offering you for years. And you set up 2 automatic transfers, triggered the day after every paycheck. $190 to savings, $190 to a brokerage account. That's 5% of your take-home pay to each, 10% total. $380 a month that moved before you ever saw it. The cuts you made in week 2, that $190 you recovered, funded almost all of it. The system paid for itself. You didn't feel motivated that week. Motivation is temporary. You built something better, a system. The machine ran whether or not you felt like it. Whether you had a bad week or a great one. Whether the market dropped or the news was chaos. the transfer happened. The money moved. And for the first time in years, the $80 that used to be left over by accident became $380 moved on purpose. That's the difference between drifting and deciding. Week 4, you looked at the debt. Really looked at it. $6,200, 22.99% APR. Minimum payment of $185. You pulled up a credit card payoff calculator and typed in the numbers. At the minimum payment only, you would be paying on that card for 4 years and 2 months. Total interest paid, over $2,000. You were going to hand your credit card company $2,000, just in interest, on top of what you already owed, simply by doing nothing. Then you changed one number. You added an extra $100 per month. $285 total. The payoff date moved from 4 years and 2 months to 2 years and 1 month. The interest you'd pay dropped by over $1,100. $100 extra a month. 2 full years of debt erased. $1,100 kept. You also made a phone call. 4 minutes. You asked your credit card company if they could lower your interest rate. You'd been a customer for 3 years, always paid on time. They dropped it to 18%. That one call saved you an additional $340 in interest over the remaining life of the balance. 4 minutes of mild discomfort, $340. Combined with the extra payment, you had redirected over $1,500 away from your credit card company and back into your own life, without earning a single dollar more. Week 5, $1,000. It sounds small, but consider what it actually meant. Nearly 4 in 10 Americans can't cover a $400 emergency without borrowing. You were now 2.5 times past that threshold, and growing. A car repair, a medical copay, a flight home for a family emergency. For the first time, any of those things could happen, and you would handle it with cash, not a credit card charging you 23% to borrow against your own future. You got to $1,000 faster than you thought. The $46 you recovered from canceled subscriptions helped. You sold a few things you hadn't touched in a year. Old equipment, clothes, a tablet. That was $230 over a weekend. You picked up one small side job, a few hours of something you already knew how to do, a few hundred more. 27 days in, $1,000 sitting still, waiting for the next emergency that would no longer become a crisis. And something shifted. Not excitement, quieter than that. The feeling that you were someone who could handle what came next. Week 6. You opened the brokerage account and funded it with that first automatic transfer, $190. You bought into a single S&P 500 index fund. No individual stocks, no options, no picking winners. Just the 500 largest companies in America, weighted by size, rebalanced automatically. Over the last 100 years, that index has returned an average of about 10% per year. Here's what that means for $190 a month, invested consistently. In 5 years, assuming that historical average holds, you'd have roughly $14,700. In 10 years, $38,600. And if you kept the habit for 30 years without ever increasing the contribution, that $190 a month becomes over $400,000. Some years, the account would be down. Some years, up 20% or more. That's not a flaw in the plan. That's just what the market does. The 10% is an average over decades, not a guarantee for any single year. You didn't need to be clever. You didn't need to time the market. You needed to start. And the cost of waiting, of saying, I'll start next month, was something you finally understood in a way you couldn't un-understand. Every month you waited, that was compounding working for someone else instead of you. You said it. You let it run. Passive, quiet, patient. Week 7, you asked a question that most people are afraid to ask. What am I actually worth? Not as a person, as a professional in a specific market. You looked at salary data. You found that people in your role, with your experience, in your city, were making between $62,000 and $71,000 a year. You were making $58,000. That gap, conservatively $4,000 a year, had existed silently for at least 2 years. You had left $8,000 on the table simply by not asking. You prepared. You documented your contributions, pulled your performance reviews, and looked up 3 comparable salaries. And then, quietly, with the receipts, you had the conversation. Some of you got the raise, 3 to 5%, which at $58,000 is between $1,700 and $2,900 more per year. Real money. Life-changing over a decade. Some of you didn't. And that information told you something equally valuable about where you were working and what your next move needed to be. Either way, you stopped being passive about the largest number in your financial life. Your income is not fixed. It's a negotiation most people have been opting out of. Week 8, you wrote it down. Not typed it, wrote it, by hand. A specific savings goal for the next 12 months. Here's where the system stood. $380 moving automatically every month into savings and investments. $100 extra going toward the credit card. $480 a month directed with intention. Nearly $6,000 a year moving with purpose, more than most people in your income bracket managed to save over the previous 3 years combined. You wrote the number, $4,800 in investments and savings by this time next year, $1,800 in extra debt payments. Combined, $6,600 of intentional financial movement in 12 months. Specific, numbered, dated. Research suggests that writing a financial goal by hand increases your likelihood of achieving it by 42% compared to keeping it somewhere vague. But the statistic matters less than the moment. The moment you stopped keeping your financial future somewhere abstract and gave it a name, a number, and a deadline. That's when a hope becomes a target. Week 9, you made a decision about credit cards. Here's the math on both sides, because this one depends entirely on who you are. If you have the discipline to pay the full balance every month, a 2% cashback card on $3,800 of monthly spending returns about $76 a month. $912 a year just for routing your existing spending through the right card. But if you carry a balance, even once, even a small one, the math reverses. A $500 balance left unpaid for 12 months at 23% costs you $115 in interest. The cashback didn't cover it. You paid to use the card. You knew which category you were in, and you acted accordingly. No shame in either answer. Wealth is about knowing yourself as clearly as you know your numbers. Week 10, you calculated your net worth for the first time. Assets, $1,000 in your emergency fund, $570 in your brokerage account, 3 months of contributions, up slightly from market movement. Total liquid assets, $1,570. Liabilities, approximately $5,600 remaining on the credit card, down from $6,200 after 3 months of $285 payments. Student loans, $18,000. Total liabilities, $23,600. Net worth, negative $22,030. Negative. You wrote it down anyway, Because here's what that number actually was. It wasn't a verdict on your past. It was a coordinate on a map. And in 90 days, you had moved it from negative 24,200, where it sat when you started, to negative 22,000. That's over $2,000 of movement in the right direction, in 90 days, on the same income you had the whole time. The number would keep moving, slowly at first, then faster. As the debt shrank, the compound interest flipped from enemy to ally, and the investments quietly accumulated. That's how this works, in both directions. Week 11, you reviewed. You compared your average monthly spend over the past 8 weeks to where it had been before the reset. Before, $3,720 going out, $80 saved by accident. After, $3,340 in total outflows, $460 directed intentionally to savings, investments, and the extra credit card payment. The difference wasn't a sacrifice, it was a redirect. The same income, the same life, mostly. But now the money was moving inside an architecture you had designed, not just flowing through you into the world. You found 2 small leaks that had crept back in. A reactivated subscription, a few extra dining charges in a busy week. You addressed them without guilt. The system had room for imperfection. It just didn't have room for unconsciousness. That's the maintenance, the part most people skip, the part that separates a good month from a good year. Week 12, you looked further. 1 year out. Credit card balance down from $6,200 to roughly $2,800, cut in half, still being paid down every month. Emergency fund at $3,000. Investment account at approximately $2,400, assuming consistent contributions and historical market returns. 22 months out, the credit card is gone, fully paid off. That $285 monthly payment becomes $285 extra dollars you now redirect to the student loans, to investments, to whatever matters most to you then. 5 years out, the investment account at roughly $14,700, assuming you never increased your contribution above $190 a month. Net worth positive for the first time and climbing. 10 years out, investments near $38,000. Student loans gone or nearly gone. Net worth somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 positive, depending on income growth. Not retirement yet, but freedom money. The kind of number that changes the decisions you're allowed to make. Whether to leave the job you've outgrown. Whether to take a risk on something you've been putting off. Whether to handle the next crisis without a second thought. You wrote it all down. 1 year, 5 years, 10, and then you set a reminder, 90 days from that Tuesday, to come back and review. Because this wasn't a sprint you were finishing. It was a practice you were beginning. That's the story of your 90 days. You started with $412 in your account and a take-home pay of $3,800 a month, most of it disappearing without a plan. And in 90 days, on the same income you had the whole time, you recovered nearly $200 a month in spending, built a $1,000 emergency buffer, redirected over $1,500 away from your credit card company in avoided interest, and started moving $190 a month into the market. Your net worth moved over $2,000 in the right direction. Whether or not the raise came through, that progress was yours, built entirely from what you already had. The math isn't the miracle. The decision is. The version of you who has more than enough didn't come from some distant future. They came from the next 90 days. Start them.